Welcome to the final day of the 2025 American Gem Trade Association Tucson Inspire Seminar Series, sponsored by the American Gem Society. How museum experiences inspire buyers and collectors, and the role museums play with trade fairs and the industry. This is our panel discussion. Moderator is Dr. Gabriela Farfan from the Curator at the Smithsonian. Our presenters, our panelists, Violetta Wolf, Director of the Alfie Norville Gem and Mineral Museum, Kimberly Vagner, Executive Director of the Rice Northwest Museum of Rocks and Minerals, Raquel Perez, Curatrix, Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard, and Eloïse Gaillou, Director and Curator, Mineralogy Museum in Paris. Dr. Gabriela Farfan is the Corlin Whitney Curator of Gems and Minerals at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History. In her role as the curator in charge of the National Gem Collection, she is honored to be a steward of this legendary collection and looks forward to building the collection, creating wonderful exhibits, making specimens accessible to researchers and other museums, and using the collection to inspire future generations of gem scientists and enthusiasts. Like many gem and mineral aficionados, she began collecting gems and minerals at an early age, which led to a career in mineralogy. Over the past 20 years, when did you start at the age of 5?
6.
She has visited over 30 mines across the US, Canada, and Chile, and has enjoyed meeting miners, gem artists, and scientists during these adventures. After receiving a Bachelor of Science degree in Geological and Environmental Sciences at Stanford, she earned her PhD in geochemistry from the MIT WHOI Joint Program. As a research curator and mineralogist, she studies the crystal structures and chemistry of minerals formed under varying conditions in order to answer questions in environmental mineralogy, biomineralization, and gem science. Her research primarily focuses on how aquatic biocarbonates like coral skeletons, mollusk shells, and pearls record shifting aquatic environments using crystallography coupled with trace element and isotope geochemistry, for which she was the recipient of the 2024 Doris Curtis Outstanding Woman in Science Award from the Geological Society of America. Beyond her research and curatorial work, she enjoys mentoring the next generation of mineralogists from the undergraduate to the postdoctorate levels. Violetta Wolf, Director of the Alfie Norville Gem and Mineral Museum, and if you haven't gone, you need to. It's just a short walk. Has experience in museums around the country, including the Oakland Museum of California, Museum of Science in Boston, and the Mineralogical and Gemological Museum at Harvard. Prior to joining the Alfie team in 2023, she was the interim Deputy Director of Content and Collections and then Director of Collections at the Oakland Museum of California, where she served on the senior leadership team representing the collections, production, and curatorial departments, establishing overall strategy for exhibitions, preservation, and collections care. Violetta holds a master's in liberal arts in museum studies from Harvard and a Bachelor of Science degree in archaeological materials from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Kimberly Vagner, Executive Director of the Rice Northwest Museum of Rocks and Minerals, most recently served as Director of the Gems and Minerals Center of Excellence at the Perez Museum of Nature and Science in Dallas, Texas. She also worked for the Geological Institute of America. Do we know that place? Yes, we do. And credits her start in a profession by volunteering in the Mineral Sciences Department of the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History. She has a master's degree in decorative arts and design from the Parsons School of Design and has her graduate gemologist diploma from GIA. Dr. Eloïse Gaillou is the director and curator of, I'm terrible at French, so I'm just going to say the Mineralogy Museum of Paris, now known as Mines Paris PSL. After a master's degree in geology and petrology, she received her PhD in material sciences at the University of Nantes, studying opals. She combined her PhD with a DUG diploma, that's also from the University of Nantes, yes? Beginning her work on diamonds. Dr. Gaillou continued studying diamonds during her postdoc work at the Smithsonian, then at the Carnegie Institution, both in Washington, D.C. She took the position of associate curator at the Los Angeles County Natural History Museum in 2012, before eventually heading back to France in 2015 to take the position at the School of Mines, where she oversees a collection of 100,000 specimens and takes care of the permanent and temporary exhibits. She took the position of director of the museum in January just last year. Dr. Gaillou is the author of more than 40 articles, notably on opal and diamond. She regularly gives lectures in France and abroad for scientists, connoisseurs, and beginners. Dr. Gaillou is currently the French national representative for the IMA, the Commission on Museums, and is a member of the board of the Society of Mineral Museum Professionals. She is a member of the MSA, the Mineralogical Society of America, a member of the Meteoritical Society, say that without coffee, a member of the Geological Society of France, and a member of the French Society of Mineralogy and Crystallography. Raquel Perez, Curatrix of the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, has over 15 years of experience in museum management, specializing in mineral sciences. Currently the curator at Harvard University's Earth and Planetary Sciences Department, she spearheads strategic initiatives that enhance the collection, preservation, and public engagement of rare and valuable geological collections. Raquel's expertise lies in curatorial excellence, exhibition development, and collection management, with a focus on educating diverse audiences and promoting scientific discovery. With a PhD in mineral physics from ETH Zurich and a gemologist diploma from the Geological Association of Great Britain, Raquel has extensive field experience across continents. Raquel is a highly knowledgeable professional in mineralogy, petrology, and gemology, with deep specialization in geochemistry. Raquel's work emphasizes innovative approaches to gemstone provenance studies and mantle geochemical processes, leveraging advanced analytical methods and technologies to push the boundaries of the field. Raquel has overseen major projects like the preservation of Harvard's mineral collection and has secured millions in grants to fund her initiatives, making her a pivotal figure in the development of modern mineral collections. Her leadership extends beyond the museum walls, serving on national boards, advising academic programs, and fostering collaborations with international research communities. Passionate about the intersection of science and public education, Raquel continues to drive innovative curatorial practices that ensure the long-term stewardship of invaluable natural history collections while inspiring the next generation of geoscientists.
That's long. Thank you. That's a long one.
Wow.
Sorry.
Please join me in welcoming this talented group of curators.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gary, for the beautiful introductions. And thank you all so much for joining us today for this panel on the role of museums in the gem industry. So before we get started and before I ask our questions of the panelists, I want to ask you a couple questions. How many of you have been to a natural history museum or a geological museum of some kind? Please raise your hands. Every single one of you. Wonderful. And the second question is, have you learned something new by going to these museums? Raise your hands. Fabulous. So I think all of us here have a deep appreciation for the role of museums in our lives. Many of us saw minerals for the first time or gemstones for the very first time by entering a museum. And this is true of our museums. We get to see little children getting to see a gemstone, something sparkly or crystals for the very first time and just saying, wow. I don't know, how many wows have you heard in your careers? A lot of wows. And we like to think that museums are a starting point for people to get excited about this industry. So I would like to add a little bit to my introductions of these amazing panelists. I've been colleagues with these fantastic curators and directors for many years. And so I'd like to start by asking you your official title, what museum you're from, because those were rather lengthy introductions, so we're going to do a little recap here. And then how long you've been at the museum and why you decided to go work at this museum. So Violetta, let's start with you.
Sure. So hi, I'm Violetta Wolf. I am the director at the University of Arizona Alfie Norville Gem and Mineral Museum. And as has been mentioned, we're 5 minutes away, so we're very close. I started my role just about a year and a half ago, so this is my second Tucson as the official director, which is always a lot of fun. And I didn't necessarily set my career goal to only work in a gem and mineral museum. I'm really a broader scientific background, and really what excites me is that opportunity to inspire someone to be curious about the world, about nature, about how it's made up. But what really drove me to come here was that this was a really new museum with a lot of potential, and that the way our exhibits are laid out are unique, that we have a special connection to the university. So it really just seemed like a super unique opportunity to start something new and really make a big impact on what we could do for our community.
All right, I'm Kimberly Vagner, and I'm the executive director of the Rice Museum of Rocks and Minerals. And it is a small museum that is outside of Portland, Oregon, about 25 minutes west. And I would say that what drew me to the museum, well, I actually got my start in gemology through GIA. And while I was working there, I worked there for about 8 years, and my job kind of morphed. I started out in development, and I was doing in-kind gift fundraising, so all the stuff that was coming into the Institute to be utilized for education, for the museum, for research purposes. And by the end, my job had kind of morphed, and I was working with the curator at the time, almost like an assistant curator in GIA's museum. And I realized I love museums, I love this aspect of things, and that led me to go get my master's degree. And I took a little break after that, but then realized I really did love museums and wanted to be back in museums. And I got the job at the Perez Museum, which is in Dallas, Texas, and I was the Gems and Minerals director there for a few years. And after a couple of years there, I realized, well, I like gems and minerals. I really love museum management. Maybe I can combine the two and find a small museum that I could be the director or executive director of. And there were a few that actually it just turned out that there was like a couple museums that were looking for directors at that point in time. And I ended up with the Rice Museum because it was really quirky. It's, it's a rock and mineral museum in a mid-century modern home on 22 acres of property. So everybody, when I give the elevator speech, most people are like, that's weird. And then like, I don't get it. And then they get there and they're like, wow, this place is so cool. Like, you cannot find this anywhere else. And it's true. It's just very unique. And I think to Violetta's point, I just saw a lot of potential there of what could be done. And so that kind of sealed the deal. And also, to be honest, I have family up in Washington State, so that also helped a little bit. So I've been there, and I've been there for about 2 years now.
So I'm Eloïse Gaillou, curator and director of Perez School of Mines Museum, pronounced it very well. So that's in France, in Paris, in the very center of Paris, just 10 minutes walk south of Notre Dame Cathedral. So if you ever come to Paris, please come and visit. You might not find it very easily because it's hidden within the school. So you really have to enter the school, climb 2 flights of stairs before actually being able to find the museum. So people who are much aware of rocks, minerals, they know where to find us, and gemstones as well. Now we developed a lot our gem collection as well, but we'll come back to that a bit later on, I think. So I've been at this museum for 10 years already. That's a long, I know, not getting younger. And so how I started? So I started as a PhD student in Nantes, in France, doing gemology, the gemology program as well. So I was my field of interest has always been gemstones in the first place, but gem materials, not necessarily cut gems, but rough gem crystals, for example. So I was studying opals and diamonds, and then I got the opportunity, the chance to work at the Smithsonian as a postdoc, as mentioned before, and that's when I discovered the environment of a museum, and still now, the Smithsonian is still my favorite place in the world. It's really awesome because not only you have a beautiful collection for the public to see, you have an amazing collection on back, and you have plenty of tools to play with and analyze the rocks, and an amazing team as well of scientists over there. So it's a really beautiful place, and when I discovered that, I was like, oh my God, I want to be in a museum. That's where I want to be at, to have such a great collection to work with. But then eventually, you know, as a French person, I could not stay at the Smithsonian back in the day, and I had to find another job, trying to apply for jobs in France. But eventually, it was in LA that I found a job of associate curator. So I went there for a few years. Realized that it might not be the place for me. The great thing I realized though there is that I wanted to be on hand with the collection and with the exhibits. At the Natural History Museum, such large as the Smithsonian, you cannot really play with the exhibits. You cannot decide what's going to be where. I mean, not for the entire exhibit. Sometimes you have the chance to do that, but very, very small exhibits. What I loved at the LA is that you could be on hand and play and decide what's going to be out there, make the label yourself. It's like, okay, I want that. And eventually this job in France opened, and it's an amazing collection, and you know, as a heritage, as a French person, I decided, okay, I need to take care of this heritage, dating back from 1794, and the building we are in dates back from 1703, and it's overlooking the Luxembourg Garden in France, so it's a beautiful, very nice environment, no street noise, just the birds singing, so it's beautiful, and the gallery is awesome. The decor is in a wooden furniture and wooden floor from 1855. So now you know where you're gonna come to Paris. You're gonna visit us.
So I guess carry on with Eloïse. I studied on the ugly side. So I did my PhD on rocks. I was producing synthetic rocks in the labs to understand how the deep earth formed. And when I came to this, that was in Switzerland, and when I came to the States, I landed at Harvard, and I started working more on the research aspect with the department. And there was a position at the museum that opens, and I was in a museum, me? No way. Full academic. That was my path. I wanted to go for my postdoc and carry on. And then somehow life got me into working with the museum, and I figured out that that could be a good path where you still can do academia and serve more public. Sometimes academia can be very self-centered. It's all about you and your research. And museums is the opposite. It's kind of actually the opposite. So I have been in Boston at the Harvard Museum, the Harvard Mineralogical and Geological Museum. I have been now for 15 years, almost 15 years. As a curator, I do mainly research on public outreach these days, and my team tends to do more of the collections work. And I get to do sometimes exhibits, more ends. That's pretty much.
Pretty good, right?
Yeah. So
How old is the collection in the building?
So the building, our cases are similar to you, like 1850, that's the museum. The collections is the only mineral museum in the United States that has been curated continuously more than the Smithsonian. So we started 250 years ago, and there have been 11 curators, all male, until I came. But it has been always continuously operated, where the Smithsonian, they have some breaks. So in terms of collections, we probably have some of the oldest, 1790. And the holdings of the collection, we have minerals, gems, meteorites, and rocks, is around 300,000 specimens. And then just in the relation to the gem, I remember one of my first tours, and I would go out with collectors and dealers, and they would show me, oh, this is an amazing ruby, and I would be, oh, it's an amazing ruby, honey. Just a red stone. So that's when I thought, okay, I know my rocks, I know my minerals, maybe I need to do a little bit more on the gem side. So then I got my FGA. I was always passionate about stones, but once you understand more, I went deep, because then all my research has been on the geochemistry of mainly gemstones, either tourmalines or emeralds. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think we're kind of getting some hints here that each museum is quite different. We have some very small museums, we have some larger museums, and that everyone comes from a slightly different background. So I think that's wonderful, because every museum has a very important role to play in our industry. Whether you're catering to people locally here in Tucson, Arizona during the Mineral Show. I know Violetta's been incredibly busy the past few weeks.
Just a little.
Or, myself, like we cater to the world, and that might just stop by for 20 minutes, right? Or, collections that are based in universities. So each one has a slightly different role. So I would like to hear, what is your museum's role in the gem industry specifically? And with who is your audience for the most part? And so I'd like to start with Violetta and Raquel. So let's do you, Violetta.
Sure. So as Gabriela mentioned, we definitely get a lot of lots of activities going around during the Gem and Mineral Show. So we are an important part of that fabric. So both in that we have exhibits that we tend to get a lot of visitation. We also do a lot of our programming now, and we serve as an event space for a lot of our industry peers. But we're also really closely connected to the university's GEM Science program, which is one of the few programs in the country where undergraduates can receive a degree and specifically train in GEM science. So year-round, that's one of the things we do. Our curator teaches the introductory course, and we're also just that unique student opportunity. And the other thing is, in Tucson, people come here from around the world all year round because of gems and minerals. And that's something that our state takes a big pride in. So we also are serving kind of, I would say, these three main audiences, which is our industry peers at very concentrated times of year, our general Arizona audience, and then an educational undergrad audience as well.
How about you, Raquel?
Yeah. So I guess from the public perspective, all our exhibits, we try to display rocks, gems, and minerals, and we focus on the rough. Our jewelry collection is not that strong, but luckily we have an amazing group of sponsors and supporters, so we also are able to display some jewelry. In behind the scenes, what we do with the gems, we have over 1,600 gems. And those are all nice catalog, barcoding. So it's a lot of work to get, because gems are very tricky. You cannot write on them. So having know exactly where is the gem. So that curatorial work is incredibly important. Otherwise, you become a warehouse if you don't know what you have. So all our collection is curated and it's online, so you can search it. From my perspective, I focus on the research of the gems over the past few years. The emerald collection has grew incredible, because that's what I've been studying, and not either field collecting, also through loans from dealers and collectors. Again, thank you for all the industry that supports museums. And we also teach gemology. So this summer we are putting together a course for the Harvard Summer course on gems and the history of jewelry, and I'm co-teaching with my friend Melanie Grant.
Excellent.
So that's exciting, because I'm going to do the whole scientific and hands-on identification of gems, and she's going to be doing the whole history of jewelry, starting from the ancient Greeks all the way up to Cartier. So I'm excited about that course.
How long is it?
For 4 weeks. 4
Okay.
weeks intense in July. We don't know yet how many students will come.
We'll sign up.
Me too, I'm so excited about the history of jewelry, because I don't know. So I guess the role of the gem, what's the role of gems in museums, is to highlight the collections, educate the public, and preserve our own history, not just of the emerald, of the gems that we have, but also of the humans that have been behind collecting those collections. So.
And then just to flip the question,
Yeah.
what is the role of your museum in the gem industry?
That's like a small question for the audience.
What do you think?
We are a slightly different of a pure university museum because we are big enough that there is an exhibit team that is, we work with them similar to what you do at the Smithsonian. Or we have a programming team, so there I have less control of what happens. But I think overall is to really keep the industry vibrant, not get stagnant, so things will coming up. Even if you have a new stone that is rare, put it on display. Maybe you can write a little bit about the treatments. So just keeping update. This industry is changing so much, and museums are really slow in changing. So I think the public and the research is the two aspects where you can keep a little bit upgoing.
How about you two?
Okay. So let's do.
There we go.
Sorry. Okay. All right. So just going back about the School of Mines. So it's a school first, but it's a school for engineers, so scientific engineers, and we're very linked to the industry, all kind of industry. So the students, they are 24, 22, and over. They always have, most of their 3 years of study, most of the time they spend in the industry. So we have a close relationship to all kinds of industry from, of course, we will think about mining, but actually not at the School of Mines in Paris. It's not directly to mining, but more to technology, energies, social aspects. A lot of students do startups as well, but always we have to be linked with the industry. So for us, our gem collection, which is small, we only have like 2,000 gemstones, no piece of jewelry, that was not the purpose, because we're in Paris, France, and the jewelry is much better around. We're close to Place Vendôme, so we have partnership with several industry organisms, if you want, to exhibit at their place, or for them to come to our place and to actually follow visits or very specific courses. For example, like as soon as we come back with Romain, my colleague, we have luxury industry that specializes in gemstone, like a big house in Paris, who will have a training, full day training at the Paris School of Mines, not only at the museum, but in general, know about the materials, metals mostly, but also for us and our aspect, gemstones. The ethic behind mining gemstones and mining metals. So going back to tracing the gems, as your research is on, so tracing back the gems, where do they come from? So where do they come from? Well, you have to have a good collection to be preserved and last over centuries, to trace all the the cut stones, all to their origin. So you can actually use this collection as scientific tool. So any kind of researchers doing gemology or any kind of research, they can ask us for loans, and they can do non-destructive analysis for the most part. If it's rough crystal, sometimes we allow, for example, LA, ICP-MS, or little holes, 50 microns holes is fine. And actually behind we publish papers. So if we loan, it's only for the researchers who are going to publish things. We're not going to loan things for private parties who do their things and will not publish anything. So traceability for us is very important. So a lot of people, papers published recently about using gemstones to trace them back. A lot of work with the French Gem Lab as well in Paris, doing that work, because we are a small museum and we don't have the tools on site. We don't have the equipment. So we work with the French Gem Lab, for example. We worked with the Sorbonne University as well. So university people who have all the equipment to analyze the rocks.
Nice. How about you, Kim?
Okay, so just to recap, we are the Rice Museum and a very small museum. And it also says in our title, Rocks and Minerals. So we don't have a very large gem collection. However, the audience that we serve, when you look at our numbers, half of our audience is families. And the kids are primary school age, so mostly 8 to 10-year-olds. That's kind of the sweet spot. What I find at our museum is that when we get these families in, they understand gems. They've all had a connection with gems. They own a gem. Their, mom or dad has one too. Rocks and minerals, a little bit harder to understand, especially minerals. Like minerals is not a term that most people have even really come across unless it's like minerals that you eat supplements. So the wonderful thing about gems is it's like the gateway into minerals and rocks. Like we have the low-hanging fruit of a birthstone exhibit, but that really gets everybody in. Everybody has a birthstone, so they go, they look at it, they get really excited, and then they see the rough piece next to it, and they're like, oh, okay, now I kind of get what's happening here. And when they start going through the rest of the museum, then all the rest of it starts to make a little bit more sense to them, and they can start connecting with those pieces. So that I find is what's really, really wonderful about gems, is that connection is drawing people in. And also, then some of the other things that we do, we have a partnership with it's the Columbia Willamette Faceting Guild. So they teach faceting classes in one of the rooms in our house, which is really cool. So they're there certain weekends during the year, and the public can kind of like walk by and see what's going on in this other room, and they're like, what's happening here? And like asking questions, and that's really fun and gets people like kind of drawn into like, oh, this is how you potentially cut these rough pieces and what goes into it. And one of the other things I found out about that Faceting Guild in these classes, I think it's one of the only like group faceting classes that's offered in the US. So there's like a long wait list to get in, and people will travel to Oregon to like sign up and take these classes, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, so we have that partnership going on.
Do they use your material for faceting?
No, they have their own. No, we don't give collection items to them to facet. No, they bring their own. But what we did was there's like a dumbwaiter that is in between like one part of the museum and the faceting class. So what we did was we turned it into a display case. So we allow them to put things on display in that display case, but then you can look through it and see into the faceting classroom. So it's kind of like a fun thing to do. But
That's very cute.
yeah,
I love it.
but yeah. So yeah, for us, it's because we have so many kids. We also do school tours. So again, we're a small museum. So when I say this number, it might not seem like a lot, but for us, it's a lot. We have 2,500 school kids that come through every year. And so we gave like 100 school tours last year. And that's a lot for us. We were like at capacity doing that. But again, these school kids come in, it starts here. This is where they learn about it, and they get really excited, and then they go home and they tell their parents, and then they come back.
Yeah.
So
Each experience matters.
yeah.
Right? It really, really does.
Yeah.
So Gabriela, can we ask you the same question then?
Sure. So the Smithsonian is obviously the opposite. We have a very large museum, and people come from all around the world. Just first, they come and see the Hope Diamond, right? And they rush up the stairs at 10 a.m. when we open, and they get it out of their system. They see the Hope Diamond, and they're like, okay, I don't really get it. What's happening here? But they heard it's famous, right? They might not understand what a gemstone is or what a mineral is, but they see the Hope Diamond, they relax, and then they walk into the rest of the exhibit. They go into the gem hall, they see jewelry. Again, like what Kim said, you can relate to that. So we also utilize gemstones as a strategy to get people excited about science. Then they walk into the mineral hall, and a lot of exit polls have actually said that people get most excited about the minerals. Yeah. It's the least expected. They didn't expect to see them, they didn't know what they were, but that's what they learned, that's what they took away from the exhibit. We also learned recently, and I think something that museums can do for the industry, is that I think someone mentioned that a lot of people don't know what a mineral is or what a gemstone actually is. And I think it's part of our job to help educate the public. We talk to DC schools, and a lot of teachers don't teach what a mineral is because they don't know. Adults don't know the official definition. And so that's something that me and my colleagues have been working on lately. We did a video that's less than 5 minutes long that just says the definition of a mineral. So that teachers, so we aim actually more towards teachers than children, because the teachers are the ones teaching the kids. And so all of these materials, we work very closely with our education department to create these materials. And because I'm not an educator by training, I don't know what the schools need, but our colleagues do. And so, it's a team effort. But I think that's the first thing that we can do as museums is we can educate the public on these very basic elements of gem science and mineral science. So I would say that's the most important thing we do.
And second, if I might say, is to preserve the collections, because
Yeah,
the
of course.
jewelry collections that you have,
Yes.
imagine if those, or like the crown jewels, and they went away in France. So I think that's a major role for museums, really preserve the collections.
Absolutely. I think that's, it's almost too obvious, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I know,
we're
I
like
know.
museum
But I think
collections.
it's worth mentioning.
It's true.
We don't think about that part so often. I think it's
Exactly.
crucial.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you begin studying on top of it, studying a gem, you know that in 100, 200 years, it's going to be still at, this, at the museum, and you can study it again and pile up on data with new equipments evolving as well. So that's...
I mean, Eloïse got to study the Hope Diamond. She's one of the few people that have ever really studied it before. And imagine, someone 50 years ago wouldn't have dreamed of doing the type of work that she did. And who knows, maybe 100 years from now, someone else will write a paper on the Hope Diamond. So it's a constantly evolving topic. So along those lines, actually, now that we've talked a little bit about what our role is in the industry, what are some misconceptions that you think AGTA members or people from the gem industry have about your museum? Are there any specific needs, for instance, that you wish that people just knew this about your museum, but you can't really talk about it normally?
Do you want me?
Go
I'll
for
start. I don't know that it's a misconception. I think it's something that everybody thinks is like museums are so slow. They move so slowly. And the reason behind that, though, at least I can speak from experience at my museum, is that what people have to understand, and a lot of people, and I'm talking the public too, is that when we talk about money at the museum, our ticket sales and our gift store sales do not cover all of our expenses. So when you look at that budget, you're looking at 70% is being covered by ticket sales and gift store sales, and that much. And that means we have to raise 30% through contributed income. So that's donations. And a lot of people don't understand that, like that this is how most nonprofits in the US operate, is that it's like a 60 to 70%, coming from like revenue generation of ticket sales and things like that, and 30% from contributions, and how that trickles down. And that means that we don't have the resources, and by resources, that's also people, to move quickly. And so I think for us as a small museum, that's something that I'm always trying to impart very delicately, is that we are doing the best that we can, but we don't have a ton of money. So we have to be very strategic in how we spend it. And also, like, my staff we all wear multiple hats. Like, we are doing a million things. And so we try our best to get to everything, to get to every question that comes our way, or every thought, or every project, or every, thing that comes out. But if we don't respond, it's not because we're ignoring you or because we're lazy. It's just that, like, we're doing 20 million other things, I mean, I will say, like, as executive director of this museum, one of the things to understand is, like, we are a rock and mineral museum in a historic house on 22 acres of property. What that means for me is that I am in charge of a park, so 22 acres with nature trails, a historic house, meaning things constantly break, and when they break, those parts don't exist any longer. Plus actually the rock and mineral collection is the easiest part of all of it. It's really actually lovely. It doesn't do anything, but everything else likes to break on me. So, yeah.
How big is your staff?
There's 7 of us, but remember, when I say 7, one person's a part-time bookkeeper. Then I've got somebody who's a gift store manager, I have a collections manager, and then I have 2 people. One's like guest services facilities coordinator, and another one's who's a museum education assistant. So, I mean, it might seem like a large staff, but it's really not, especially when you've got all these other parts to be managing as well. Like, we don't have an operations manager or like a grounds manager, right? So,
Or IT.
or IT. We don't have an IT
Or marketing,
person.
or-
Marketing,
yeah.
like that all becomes me. I am all of those things. So yeah. I will get off my soapbox. Thank you for listening.
How about you, Violetta? Now that you've been here
Yeah.
for a couple years and you're starting to see how your museum is interacting, especially during Tucson, like what are some things that
Yeah,
have come
so
up?
I think I will just echo what Kim said as well, that I think we're not industry. We don't move as fast as industry. And we just never will be able to. So forgive us that. And I think the other thing is that when we're putting together an exhibit or an educational program, right, a lot of people, if this is their first time thinking about an exhibit, a lot of people will conceive it just like if you're writing an article or a paper or a presentation. And the really tough thing about museum education is we're all trying to really do free choice education. Right? So we're not trying to have someone come in and read every label in the exact same order. We're trying to have people look at the things that speak to them, to have a different way of experiencing the different objects. So whether that's a touchable display, a formal display, a video. And so the way that we have to think about what makes a good exhibit, it's not what makes a good paper or what makes a good presentation. Because your visitors might look at two things and then skip to the next gallery and come back and look at something on a bottom shelf. And we have to think about how can all of those different combinations still add up to something that's meaningful, that still makes sense, that still get across a very complicated concept. You know, when we think about the research that several of my colleagues do, how do you convey that if someone might look at 3 random things, right? It's a really different mindset. So when we collaborate with people, we have kind of a really different style of starting to develop an exhibit. It's not, okay, great, here's my 5 points, why can't you just do those 5 shells? So I think that that's, it's both very difficult, but can be really, really fun to try and think in such a different way about how to present and share. You know, we're trying to create a buffet of information for people. So it's just a really different approach than writing your research paper or doing a presentation.
I like that buffet of information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ella, you have any? You want to go?
Yeah, sure, why not? One misconception, well, it's actually not a misconception because it's real. You're a French museum, therefore you don't have money, therefore you cannot afford what I'm showing you. That's basically what's happening for me in Tucson. But honestly, we're lucky enough to know a lot of great people from the industry, and they know we cannot afford, but they still are okay to share the story with us, to share the, okay, so this is a new discovery, let me show you. You know, even if they don't have the, they're losing time, I know, with us, but they're still taking this time to educate us, so we can educate in return. And it's not a misconception, indeed, we don't have any money to purchase gemstones, not the ones that we want at least. Just because, again, as you were saying, we have a fee that is €7 full price. Reduced price is 4, you know, and we just passed for 26 people who are 26 or younger. It's free, so I know we're going to make even less money than before. But for me, a museum should be free anyway. And we are not supported by the government because we are the school. The school is supported by the government, but basically the income of the everything that we receive from the school is spent on renovating the museum itself, and a few things to purchase eventually, and for the staff to live. Even replacing the lights comes from the income from the tickets, basically. So, you know, that's kind of tough. Very small team. Last year we gave 198 tours, visits. We had one person who was hired for that, but the school decided it was not great, so they didn't renew him. So it was this guy and the 2 of us with Romain giving the tours last year, and we managed to do almost 200 tours for young kids to retired people. So I know that this year, again, we're not going to be able to make that much, and you know, finance is going to be the big issue for us, and honestly, if I have money, I'd rather pay for someone to be at the museum, give tours, and explain to people than buying the gemstone. That's the deal that I have. You know, the downside that I have right now, but hopefully it's going to change soon, and thanks to donation. I mean, we live thanks to donation. You were saying most of the mineral collection, most of the gem collection was built thanks to donations over the last 250 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I think along those lines, coming back to where we can strengthen the relationship between AGTM members and museums, is to really build those collaborations. So as you can hear, we all struggle with finances and people time, but if we strengthen those, it will be a win-win situation. If I'm gonna do an exhibit, I don't have the pieces, maybe I can get them from the members to support the exhibits, and maybe those end up being donations, maybe not. But I think we need to strengthen the members, so the AGTM members and the gem industry don't see the museums as something static that doesn't do, but something that we can work together. There are so many things we can do. It's not just public, it could be research, it could be collections work, and it's not just AGA, AGTA or GIA labs, but it's also, I think we have a lot to do with the museums.
Especially that we build a lot of exhibits, temporary exhibits. I mean, we have 1 to 2 per year, even with a small staff. We try to get small, because we don't have an exhibit space, but a small temporary exhibit that's going to be fast. But at least people have the opportunity to come back and see something new. So we have the birthstone exhibit as well, but in France it doesn't exist. We don't have birthstones.
No.
So people are like, what's this concept of birthstones? So actually it was like,
fascinating.
Yeah, this was cool.
Always starting birthstones in France. There we go. No, but I like what you mentioned, that it's very special when people in the industry teach us about what they're seeing, because we do have to know what's out there, right? So that we can then educate the public about it. From our perspective at the Smithsonian, we also will collect reference specimens. Yeah. So just because it's not the perfect quote unquote museum quality specimen or gemstone doesn't mean that we don't want it. So yes, it will probably sit in a drawer, but a researcher 60 years from now will be able to write a paper on it. Or maybe next year a student will say, hey, I just heard about that really interesting locality of, some pisodite, and I want to study pisodite. Do you have any pisodite I can study? They can come to the Smithsonian or to any of these museums that have pieces of pisodite, and we will loan them so that they can do their research. So it doesn't have to be pretty in order to be useful.
We take chips of gems, actually for that very purpose. They become reference specimens, and we can make holes in them and do geochemistry.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that's another misconception. I also like the fact that you mentioned we are slow. Right? I would say, you think you're slow? Try the Smithsonian. We're extra slow.
I volunteered there, I know.
But there's a good reason. But here's the silver lining, right? It's slow, but the end product is magnificent. Yeah. Right?
And it lasts forever.
It lasts forever. You have, we see 5 to 6 million visitors a year. And so, yes, it might take several years to get something on exhibit, but boy, is it worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, my next question. One of our biggest goals is to inspire the public to care about natural history and our favorite objects, gems and minerals. Share an interesting statistic about your museum's collections or how the public engages with your museum.
Who do you want to begin?
I can dive in if you know what I'm thinking. So one of the things, the question first?
Yeah, interesting statistic seems like an oxymoron.
Well, let's see. So I think the thing that absolutely shocked me, so we, part of I think what all of us do is we look at who's coming to our museum and when, that we do some level of basic audience tracking or research. And, I knew that in Tucson during the summer, we're probably not going to get as many people as we do in February during the gem show. Mm-hmm. And I thought our highest visitation would be February. Our highest visitation is in March.
Oh.
That we get about 15% more visitors in March than we do in February. And that is normalized to it's not because February is a short month, right? So it's, based on the daily average. And we haven't been able to do any actual polling, but what we think is happening is that people around town, you see all this gem and mineral action, you maybe buy something, and then you want to actually go and learn about it. So for us, it's really interesting to see that our best opportunity to serve the public is March.
Okay.
Wow. That's really cool.
Right?
Yeah.
Was that interesting?
Yes.
There you go.
I can go after if you want.
Yeah.
We have been focusing a lot on digital, so trying to create more online exhibits, because a permanent or temporary exhibit at the museum at some point is going to go off, and that's it. There is no record. But digital exhibits are very powerful. So we have a working program with the Google Cultural Arts, and all our interns have been focusing more on gems and trying to create stories about the gems and putting online. So much more digital based these days than we used to be. That's where we are focusing more on, and how we get, so we have Google Analytics running behind, and we see that people really use our database coming through those online exhibits. They are much more aware of where we are and who we are thanks to those.
Yeah. I feel like during
Different
COVID there was a lot of that because
Yeah.
we couldn't be in the museums, and so a lot of museums turned to a lot of more digital outreach, and it's been really, really useful.
So it's interesting because I 100% agree. Like there needs to be a digital component to all museums to keep relevant. But one of the things that I found at our museum is because we are this like mid-century modern historic home, that people, and that we are a little bit older and we obviously have been able to do a lot of like the digital upgrades, but people like it. They like that they're coming and it's like they're getting off of their phones, they're getting like taking a break from all of that, and they have to like, we have, I mean, I spy sheets for the kids, but everybody loves them. Even the adults love them. I see adults doing them around the museum. But it's this idea of like, oh, okay, so I have to be off my phone for a little bit of time. Like I'm now gonna have to like focus on what's in front of me and really looking at it and engaging with the people that are with me. And so it's, for us, I'm finding that it's gonna have to be this balance of like digital and not digital, because I think that's one really great thing that I've noticed is that people are taking that break at the museum, and so I want to keep giving that to them and not be like, okay, now we've become totally digitized, you know? Because I came, and I should say this too, is that I came from the Perez Museum, which is, it was built in 2012, so it's a much newer, larger, it's almost a science center because everything is like hands-on there. So the Gems and Minerals Hall had like digital touch screens and all this kind of stuff. So I came from a very like digital place. And then now I'm at this like very old school museum, but I love it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something we see a lot, that your digital experience is a different digital experience than your visit, right? So if someone is looking at your data on your website, it's probably for a really different reason, or they're getting a different sensation, and we're really trying to not replicate that when you do an in-person visit. That's something completely different.
Yeah.
That I think that's one of the things that maybe people are looking for, something that's a very distinctive reason to interact with us, and we just have to make sure we're focused on what that reason is.
Yeah.
So going to statistic, we have none because we don't have the staff to make them. But you know what you're saying about the exhibits, old style museum. We tried exhibits running with QR codes, and people can actually learn more by scanning QR codes. Doesn't work because people either they take pictures with their phone or they don't have their phone with them. They're just experiencing. So no, not real statistics, but again, we see that once people have a physical tour with one of us at the museum, they engage much longer at the museum. They stay much longer afterwards, because like, okay, now we know how to apprehend the museum. We learned a lot of things. Now I will look at things differently. For a visitor coming up with a free visit, no guided tour, they're gonna go through the museum very quickly, and they're like, yeah, that's beautiful. And at the end, they will have learned, oh, it's pretty, and so many diverse, so many different species of minerals, and oh yes, some of them are used in your cell phones or in some pharmaceutical like components. But that's it. But for us, the most important thing would be to be able to actually to give the tours, because it inspires people much better. You know, like we live inside the museum. Our offices are inside the museum, and we hear the ahs and oh my God, and look, oh, but this is a fossil, right? Like, oh, this thing is a fossil, and when we walk past them, actually, no, it's not a fossil, it's actually dendritic crystallization, or we explain the fast crystallization of this thing that look like a plant, but that is not a plant. And then, oh my God, and they engage, and sometimes you try to go from one place of the museum to the other. You think it's going to take you 2 minutes. Nope, it's going to take you 1 hour, because people will listen to you, and they will continue engaging with you and asking more and more questions. So yeah, definitely that's, you know, for us, it would be that aspect to focus on. Not necessarily digital insight, digital outside for temporary exhibits, playing with the rocks as well, because we're a school and the students of our school will not directly look at the rocks themselves. They are not geologists, but they will play with the collection. They will, for example, like do a reconstitution in 3D, but using the latest that they develop, the latest numerical way to actually like scan your object. I don't know if you try to scan, for example, transparent quartz. Doesn't work very well, right? They try to develop that technique to actually go and do things like this. So yeah,
That's really great. Yeah, I think
going
we're,
off a bit with the question. Sorry.
we're sensing a theme that I think one of the roles that museums play is showing people the real objects.
Yeah.
Right? Even here, we have the Hooker Emerald downstairs, and one of the police officers that's guarding it, someone asked him, "Is that real? Is it really real?" And he's like, "Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here," right? And so I think people sometimes don't expect to see real things, and that's what museums offer. We offer the ability to actually see the real objects and hopefully put away your phones for a minute.
And sometimes touch them as well.
Yes, yes.
Oh yeah,
Touchable specimen, yeah.
that's what another thing that we've done is that if it is not behind glass, you can touch it. So so it just makes it really easy for visitors too, so that they, you know, especially with little kids, is that you don't have to be like, "Oh my God, don't touch that." And it's like, "Oh no, it's fine. If it's not behind glass, don't worry about it." We've made it easy on you.
I think we might be the first museum that has "please touch" signs
Yeah,
on
yeah.
our crystals. Nice. Do you have a favorite gem specimen in your collection that you would like to share with us today?
I'm not beginning. Because I don't have one.
I'm the same. I don't have.
babies.
Yeah, I mean,
don't
can you just pick one of your kids? No, you can't,
They're
right?
all our
Okay.
children. We love them
All
all
right.
equally. Consensus here.
Okay, well, I don't have like a favorite, but there's one that I kind of gravitate towards because it's this beautiful objet d'art, and it's a sunstone that was carved by Dallin Hargrave, and then it's like set on this base, and it has like a polar bear on the inside if you like look really closely, but it has like the beautiful kind of spectrum of Oregon sunstone, so it's got like kind of the reds and the like a little bit orange and greens in it, and because Oregon's state gem is the sunstone, I just kind of love that piece because every time I'm like, it's the state gem. I love telling people that.
Can I just say about the rough? Is okay if I answer something about a gem rough? Is it fine? Does it fit?
No.
Okay, so my favorite rock, but which could be cut as a gem, but never you will do that because it's awesome. It's a large piece of rhyolite, so it's a tuff, so it's basically some product of a volcano. And inside this rock, volcanic rock, you have holes that were made just thanks to the evaporation of gas that exited the rock. And within those holes, you have opals, some opals that precipitated inside.
Oh, that's cool.
And you have two eyes. It makes two eyes of two different colors. One is fire opal. The other one is a colorless opal, but with play of color, bright play of color. And then you have a nose. I mean, it makes like a nose of opal. And the nose is yellow in color with iridescent color as well. And you have a little mouth as well, like this. And it's plenty of nodules, different nodules, so you can tell the story where the rock comes from. It comes from a volcano, so obviously this one comes from Mexico. And you can tell the story of the volcano, how the ashes precipitated, if you want, cemented to make this rock, and then why you have different colors for opals. So the play of color, the lack of play of color, and the color itself, like the red in the opal, why the opal is red, why this opal is orange, all that kind of thing. So it just, just for the story. It gives
Great
a good
story.
story.
Yeah.
Never that will be cut. Never.
Yeah. It'd be a very large necklace.
The whole
Heavy.
thing.
Well, that's kind of the great thing about getting to work at a museum is every day you have the chance to fall in love with something new, right? That we get to see so many things that maybe haven't been seen for decades or that only get seen by a handful of people. So for me, it's always, there's a new favorite every day. My current favorite is we just got a donation of, it's a project where a donor will give rough pieces of stone to contemporary cutters and say, cut whatever you think you can cut. So we get some of just the most creative and unusual cuts. So in our most recent donation, there's a gemstone. It's a quartz with a back carved alien figure and DNA swirls. So it's just really completely surprising gems I would never have been able to imagine. So that is my current favorite.
Whimsical gems, I like it.
Do you have one at the Smithsonian, Gabriela?
I'm not allowed to, but I think I have some. I mean, I feel like the Hope Diamond is the diva of the collection, so she deserves all the respect. So I do love the Hope Diamond, and it's a huge honor to get to be the caretaker of the Hope Diamond. And I'm going to say this now because the press release is coming out officially tomorrow. So Eloïse and I got to work on a gem. We did a lot of science this summer on a new red diamond that was gifted to the Smithsonian in 2023. So the Winston Red Diamond will be on exhibit starting in April, and it's currently my favorite just because it's the first major gift that has come into the museum while I've been curator, so I feel very connected to it.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
That's so
And it's a spectacular stone.
That's awesome.
So
How many carats is it?
it's 2.33 carats.
That's
From
big
where?
for a red.
We don't know.
Wait, what was the question?
Location. Where is come
location.
from? Yeah, locality. Okay.
So if you want to read more, our article will be coming out soon in Gems and Gemology. So it's fun. Like, so being museum professionals, like, we get to work with the specimens. We're not only putting things on exhibit, but sometimes we actually get to do research on the specimens in our collection. I think that's something that's very, very special. I know that many of you have gotten to do some projects on them, so yes.
Do you have one then? You don't want to answer that question? You don't have one favorite?
I'll pass that question.
I feel like the necklace, you bring
You
that
know,
a
I could
lot.
highlight the necklace, but I've been working a lot on Sumep material from Namibia, so now it's all about Sumep and all about emeralds. So it depends what we are working. The same like what you said, Violetta, depends what you see. For me, it's more what I work with. I understand, like, I analyze the Hamlin necklace. Now that you mentioned, I guess I need to tell the story. It's a necklace that all the stones are tourmaline. They were mined from the same mine up in Mica in Maine back in the 1800s. And the cutter, the collector, did it for 35 years. And he was a surgeon. He was a Harvard surgeon, and then donated the whole collection to us. So we have the book, the design, we have the necklace, we have all the cut stones. So that's also, I think, for me, is the legacy of such a collection that you can do, not just the research. It's currently on display, the Hamlin necklace, with the book. But it's also the history and, yeah, I was working a lot. I was trying to get the provenance of the gems. There are a couple of tourmalines that they seem to be from California. So he was trading already back then, because California was the second pegmatitic deposit that you have in the States. First one was Maine. So yeah, there is a lot that you can tell when you work with some pieces, and I think that's, so it was a favorite back then, not anymore a favorite. I know, yeah, thank you.
So we obviously grow our collections by donations. So actually a question I get a lot is, how do I make a donation to a museum? So Kim, how would someone make a donation to your
Me.
collection? Talk to
Again,
Kim.
multiple hats. So yes, if you are interested in or if anyone is interested in making a donation, they would contact me directly. I'm just Kim at ricenorthwestmuseum.org. But also, even if you go through our info at, it just gets routed to me. And then I guess, are you asking how the process works?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit mysterious for the average person, and sometimes even for AGTA members, they say, I have an extra stone that would be nice to give to a museum.
So
How do I get
benefits
started?
as well from
yeah.
donations.
So for us, it's one of those things where we look at what is being offered and whether it fits, like a whole within our collection, or we actually have a lot of uses. So even if it doesn't fit our collection, it can be utilized for educational purposes. We have a gift store, so it could potentially be sold and raises funds for the museum. We also have a rock pile that's outside that everybody gets to take a rock home with them that visits us. That's cute. Yeah, so even like just random rocks, we're like, yes, we'll take them because they go in the rock pile. We're always very clear with donors, like what happens when it comes into a museum, because I think that's really important to understand. Is for most museums is that, or for all museums, is that we at the end of the day decide what happens with it. The donor really, you know, it's not up to the donor, it's up to the museum. So you kind of have to relinquish that right. And if you're not comfortable with that, like if I have a donor who's saying I want it to be used for this very specific purpose and be on display in perpetuity, I would say, I'm so sorry, but we can't accept it because we can't honor that, and I don't want to get into any, problems later on down the line.
I think that's a very important point. I don't know of a single museum that will allow
I think it's all museums.
For something to be put in perpetuity, and there's a very specific reason for that. Imagine that 50 years from now, next curator is then going to have their hands tied. They can't design a cool new exhibit because this one gem has to be on exhibit. So not even the Hope Diamond has that written in the clause, right? So every single gem or every single mineral that goes into, I think, all of our museums would be treated the same way.
Yeah. But it's important to know that the museum has the ultimate decision of what happens to what's like coming through and being donated.
Yeah, that's
Can I
going to
ask
be.
another question?
Sure.
What about cases like the British Museum curator setting fire to its only dodo specimen because he thought it was an irrelevant object, and they only rescued the head and 1 foot from the fire?
So
So how do you deal with curators who will disregard the value of the collection pieces?
You
because
fire
they
them.
disagree?
Very simple.
Yeah.
You fire that curator. I'm sorry.
and I think similar to how Kim was explaining that
Yeah.
almost all museums have a specific plan or goal in what we are trying to acquire. We would also have a very specific plan or goal for what gets removed from the collection.
And there's policies.
And a process.
There's a very strict policy and procedures in place for that.
And there would be, so we would outline our goals of the reason you would deaccession, which is the process of formally removing something from the collection. For us, the reasons we would do that are the specimen is damaged beyond repair, right? So if something breaks or, powders over time, if it's proven to be a imitation or a fake, if it no longer serves the museum's purposes. And so it would be for these very specific outlined reasons. And usually these policies are not posted on our websites, but most of the times if you're an interested donor or just a researcher, we would make those available. Just it's something as a museum that operates in public trust, we owe the public that accountability.
Yeah.
So most museums would be willing to share how those processes work, at least at a higher level.
There's usually like a collections policy in place, like that's overarching, and all of that is detailed within the collections policy. And most of the time, if you're deaccessioning something, it's not one person making that call. It's something that, the curators looked at it, the executive directors looked at it, and then the board has to vote and decide this is okay to deaccession. But, the curator and the executive director or whoever those people need to be are making the case for why it should be deaccessioned. So it's very, very strict.
Every museum is different, and there are different levels of strictness, but I think we're sensing a theme here that things in the past were very different.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there's a lot of paperwork involved for anything, whether it's an acquisition or deaccession. I mean, I don't think we've deaccessioned anything at the Smithsonian in the last 50 years.
Wow.
Because it's just too hard, right? It's not feasible.
That's the same thing for us.
Yeah.
Nearly impossible to deaccession. Honestly, the last time it was at the very beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And it was not done the right way, and the French government was not happy with us. Basically, the French president has to sign for the accessioning. So believe me, he's not going to be bothered with signing the accessioning paper. So we just don't de-accession anything anymore. But again, what you said, when we accept a donation, we can have several ways of accepting the donation. Either it goes into the permanent collection, that means that it has a number written with ENSMP for the National Collection of the Paris School of Mines. And once it's entered, that cannot never leave the museum. Otherwise, we can accept for education, for research, and it's not going to have a number on it. And then we can do whatever we want, even go through the association, not directly to the museum, but for the friends of the museums. They will take it and for resale, for example, and to make money for the collection. But that's really clear in the donation paperwork we have. And for us, pretty simple to donate. We just have to fill a piece of paper saying that you own the specimen, you acquired it legally. And for us, we have policies that we follow as well. It's the ICOM policy. So we are strict. We follow the rules of the ICOM, basically the International Commission on Museum, if I'm not mistaken. So we follow these policies. And for us in France, I know that in the US it's different. You have full tax deduction. For us in France, it's only 60% tax deduction. So the value of your donation is going to be tax deductible, but only 60%, not 100% like it is in the US.
Yeah. So basically, if you are interested in making donations, we have many museums represented here, and we are the people you talk to. So now you know our faces.
And sometimes we collaborate.
We have. We actually did a collaboration recently with a big agate donation that was offered to the Smithsonian, but it was just too large. So rather than having to later on decide, okay, we're going to de-accession this portion, I was like, I am not going to accept more than we can handle. And I reached out to Raquel at Harvard. I reached out to Erin Celestian at the LA County Museum. And between the 3 museums, we put together 3 collections to preserve this very important agate and jasper collection. And so it was actually really, really fun because now we know that parts are being preserved in various museums.
Excellent.
So we'll send things to each other. If we're, let's say we have 20 sapphires from Yogo, and we're like, I think I would never turn down a Yogo. But let's say there's something that we have 20 of, but I know that Violetta doesn't have one yet in her collection. We might say, well, this one will probably never see the light of day at the Smithsonian, but how about you give it to another museum? So
local museums as well.
I also think, some museums have different strengths.
Yeah.
So I believe that why I should have an amazing Yogo sapphire when, for example, Kim at his place, not necessarily you, but maybe it serves more your purpose and your mission that it serves my mission. So because we don't have that strength. That was
FYI, we don't have any Yogo sapphires.
Well, and I think that's our shared focus is always what will maximize public good. And sometimes our institution isn't the right place for something, but we always try to do our best to help our community, that it's really about a collective benefit. So I think that's what's so fun about having such wonderful colleagues is you actually can work together for this common goal instead of being independent and not being able to find a solution for a donor.
And we have the chance to be part of the society as well. That's resemble everybody from the mineral community, the curators group. So it's called the Society of Mineralogy Museum Professionals, and we are all part of it. Yes,
all part of it. We're all
and
members.
it's a network around the world that connect all the curation or curators, collection managers working in the museums. So when we have a question, maybe regarding collection or exhibits or anything, pretty much, we just have this wonderful network of almost 200 curators and collection managers around the world.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And we have the vice president here, and we have a board.
What am I, secretary?
You're on the board.
Secretary now?
Yeah.
I'm not following anymore, sorry.
Okay. How much time do we have left?
It's 2:20. You've got another 20, 25 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. Just want to make sure I don't have to cut any questions. Okay. What is your favorite thing about working in a mineral museum?
The community.
Community. Is it the community of within your group of who you work with? The community.
This community.
This
The
community.
industry.
Okay.
I think we have to, we wear many hats, but one of them is to be able to, the relationship that you build over the years with the people, not just collectors, but dealers, curators. So I think for me, yeah, I love my science, so that's an amazing thing, working in a museum, being able to do the research and privilege to do, but the community will be also I don't know which one will be. But
So you're the people and the rock. I like the rocks.
Yeah, I know. I'm a people person. I'm a people person. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's true. That's why we roomie together.
No, but like, I mean, we have the chance to be teachers. We teach exhibits development, and cleaners, and you know, we do a bit of everything. So that's the great thing about working at this museum. That's why I chose this museum as well. We do everything, from carrying the display cases to cleaning, as I said, to like getting the chance to travel around the world to actually like get to see the rocks.
Do a paper on a red
people.
diamond. Seems like there are many fun aspects every day.
We do everything, and over the last 20 years I've been in this community, you know pretty much everybody. It's a small community, as you were saying. It's really awesome, you know. And the gem and mineral community building up together, I think that's the best. You know, I began with the gems, and now I'm spending, I mean, when I was coming to Tucson, I spent most of my time at AGTA, GTX, and now I realize that I spend most of my time looking at outside, looking at minerals mostly. So, you know, it's changing over the years, and I feel like I can keep in touch much easier with the gem community outside of Tucson. Sometimes, because I think we have many more options to conferences or even like I don't know, like relations in general. It's much easier. Rock community is more when you go to the shows. Yeah.
Interesting.
For me, I would say it's the kids coming through the museum and seeing them get so excited about rocks and minerals and taking that away with them, you know, and learning something, you know, how important rocks and minerals are to our everyday lives. And I think that that's something that people don't really understand, and then they come to the museum and they're like, oh, I thought it was just like dusty old things like on display. And then they're like, oh my God, like everything I utilizes minerals in some way. And so that's just something I think it's so, I love it. Like when I'm having a hard day and then I go out and I see like the kids going, oh my God, I love all this stuff. I'm like, all right, this is why I do it. Okay, I'm okay. But yeah, that's probably the biggest for me.
Yeah, I love, you know, I say we've done something right if every day we've made someone curious, right? We tackle gems and minerals from the scientific side, the historic side, the artistic side, so there's really a broad interpretation, but just at the end of the day, if someone walked away and thought, I'd like to learn something new, or I'm capable of learning something new, I'm capable of building a new skill, I'm capable of understanding a new concept, that just always touches my heart and reminds me, while we're doing these hard, you know, many-hatted, sometimes hard to pull off things, it's really just exciting to remind yourself that someone is walking away with that perspective.
Yeah, it's nice to know that the work that we do will help someone care, right? You want someone to care about minerals and care about gems. It also is very nice to work with the gems and minerals. I'm not gonna lie, it's one of the reasons I took the job. You know, while we don't have our own personal collections, right, we get to handle some of the world's best specimens, and it's a huge privilege to do so. And we get to see the best of the best here in Tucson, too. Like, it's really, really special when someone says, here, I want to show you something. And that's really what gets me going. So what do you think? Oh, wait, let's have some audience questions first before we end with our last question for the evening. What would you like to know about museums?
No question.
From this panel, are there any men in museums?
Yes.
Anyone?
There are men in museums. In fact, it's relatively recent that we have this many women in museums.
Yeah.
My colleague is over there. Look, he's a male.
Yeah. Greg is over there. We have Mike Wise. Our team at Smithsonian is 7 of us, and 2 of us are women.
Yeah, it's 4 of us, 2 women, 2 men.
We're evenly split.
We're 5, all women.
We are all majority. We are 7, 1 man.
But Kimberly, you have 7 people. How can you be evenly split?
Oh, I take the part-time bookkeeper. I sometimes I'm sorry, Fortune, you're amazing. I love you, but I kind of usually end up forgetting about her.
Okay, thanks. That's great.
I got to know a lot about minerals and gems through the seminar. I wanted to know, how does this take it forward in terms of the base is there for the gems, for the minerals, for the rocks, but there are museums who also exhibit about jewelry and have collections which are portrayed or themes which are based in that. Do any of the museums that we have here also take that, also a part of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we, in addition to explaining the scientific side or the historic side of gems, we also have, exhibits that take more of what you would think of like a classical art museum approach, so showcasing cutters, jewelry designers, lapidary artists as artists, and talking about, that's what they consider themselves. So I think we really try to show geological materials, so gems, minerals, meteorites, fossils, rocks, that they all have scientific, historical, and artistic contexts, and those are not as discrete as maybe we like to think, that there's a lot of overlap between all of those points of view.
People love stories, right? And so jewelry is a wonderful way to weave a story and then end up with a natural history object. And so at the Smithsonian, for instance, we don't focus on the jewelry, but at the end of the day, we end up talking about the jewelry anyway. That being said, there are museums out there that do focus on jewelry, and I think Violetta's museum does a great job of that. But also the Victoria and Albert Museum in London has a phenomenal history of jewelry collection and an exhibit. So you can actually go through in time and look at the history of jewelry. So it really depends on the goal of that museum. So I think natural history museums tend to be a little less focused on the jewelry, but we still use their stories to talk about minerals and gems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we have the museums in France that are dedicated to jewelry as well. And of course, we're all partners, but they do it much better than we are. And again, we all working together. It's like, okay, we have the rough, we have some of the cuts, and we partner. So we actually organize temporary exhibits on jewelry because we don't have any, or art as well. Always have to relate with minerals somehow. And then if they want to know more, they will go to the specific museums.
Hello. Are you doing field work in museums? Or are you interested to doing field work?
I do field work. I love field work. This is probably the only summer I haven't gone, but that's the best way to also source your materials. So it depends what's your focus, and you can grow if you have funding. In my case, I also get sponsored to go out in the field and collect the materials. But as a geologist, I love field work. So yeah, I go every year, usually.
I don't anymore. I'm doing mostly paperwork nowadays. Private tours and teaching, and that's pretty much all I do, unfortunately.
And I would say that we don't have the staff for that right now. But back in the day, there was somebody who was on staff that did field work. And actually, that's a large part of our collection is from him and the field work that he did.
For our institution, we partner with the departments at the university. So there's a Department of Geosciences, of Mining Engineering, of Mining and Mineral Resources, the Lunar Planetary Lab. So we have a lot of academic departments where that is where the field work would happen. It's complicated because our curator is also an adjunct faculty member in that, so she would have the opportunity to do field work through it. But we're more a centralization for all of these different academic departments to have one museum that they all overlap with, instead of having separated smaller collections, for example. So it's unlikely that we will be a major source of fieldwork, but we cooperate with the researchers who do it.
At the Smithsonian, I kind of see Tucson as fieldwork. Like when I set my away message, I'm like, I'm at the show. Let's treat this like fieldwork because I'm not going to respond to your email for a while. But that jokes aside, we could do fieldwork. So if I suddenly decide I want to study a specific locality, I have luckily the freedom to do scientific research, but it's very individually driven. So if I want to go somewhere as a curator, I could. However, that being said, we know that gems come from all around the world. In our collection, we are trying to fill those gaps. And so it doesn't make financial or time sense for me to go to every locality because I wouldn't get anything else done. And so Tucson is a phenomenal place for us to be able to collect these different materials from around the globe without having to actually go and spend all the money that it takes to fly across the world.
I think that directors and museums curators really have the chance to do field works in general, but as you are associated in a larger field of museum, you have researchers that dedicated a lot of time to field trips. Yeah, not necessarily collecting gems or rough specimens though for the collection. I know that Mike Wise, who was here earlier at the Smithsonian, he is a pegmatitic guy, so he has traveled pretty much around the world to actually go collect his own sample to do his research and entering the collection as well, right?
Yeah, some of it will be entering the collection. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. I think you answered my question partly, at least. I was wondering about acquisition. What's your strategy? What are the mechanisms by which you acquire the specimens that you're after? And how does the paths of acquisition differ from acquisition by individual collectors, acquisition by retailers? So are you on a different market, so to speak, or do you tap into the market of minerals to enrich your collections? And I apologize if that was a topic that you covered in your discussion because I just got here.
That's an excellent question. We have not actually discussed that.
Yeah.
So does someone want to start? How do you
I can go.
acquire stones?
For acquisition, I think we do both ways. It would be through fieldwork, depending on what we are working. It could be diamonds, could be emeralds, it could be rare earths in Burundi. So there are different ways that we get those, but that would be more direct sourcing. And then Tucson is my other acquisition time because it's working with collectors and donors. For the past few years, we got quite a few donations. So those are my two main sources. We have some acquisition budget, so we could potentially buy specimens. And for research specimens, we also, Mary Johnson also was a big collection that came to us a few years ago.
Only half.
Only half, there you go.
Either one is coming.
Still, it's important collection. And we could buy a reference specimen, but if we are looking for museum quality specimens, I do not have the budget. So those are the three.
If we go back in the time, for us, a museum dating back from 1794, we used to be able to buy, we had a lot of money to buy, to go on field trips. We had a lot of money to go on field trips, to exchange, and through donations. Nowadays, it's only donations and purchase with a very, very, very tiny budget, and not thanks to the museum, but thanks to the friends of the museum, and that's it. And as we want to acquire new species, for us it's like we're going to want to have the new species, but species that are still, you can still see. Yeah, because otherwise it's, like the Natural History Museum does a better job at collecting all new species. That's not our job. Something that we can see and put on exhibit for people to see. The new localities as well. So we try to cover all around the world. So we need new localities or specimens that we have already, but would be of better quality. That's the three main goals of the collection. And of course, depending on the temporary exhibits we put on, we will need to acquire some specific specimens. For example, lithium. We need to get a few like lithium-rich rock or minerals such as the spodumene and lepidolite. So it depends on the year as well.
So is there a method by which you're here in Tucson, you're walking the aisles, you see something that you really think the museum collection would love to have. It's way out of your budget. They would love to have it donated to the museum, but it's a lot of money out of their pocket. Is there a way to get that into the museum?
Loans, right? Loans. That's often a very successful way for museums to kind of bridge that gap that I would say for our museum at least 25 to 40% are on loan. So that's a great way to get something that's very, very high price that, you know, a dealer cannot afford to donate, the museum cannot afford to purchase. So that can be a really happy solution, and it also helps us keep things fresh and changing.
So do you have friends of the museum? What I call friends, you know, like a group of people who actually donate money to help and gather a nice pile of money to purchase things? I know that the Smithsonian do. Do you have such friends of the museum? No, you don't.
No, we don't currently, and I think that that's also something, we're kind of in a funny situation where we're both old and new.
Yeah.
So our museum has only been open as its own independent exhibit space for 3 years, but our collection dates back to the beginning of the university, so in the 1800s. So we have a huge diversity in how our collection was put together. And I think at this point, we're really at a turning point of figuring out what are we building into our collection for the long term. So now is probably not the right time for us to be investing in, you know, 6 or 7 figure specimens as purchases, but that's,
We're not talking about that big.
yeah, but you know, that kind of even, you know, smaller prices that until we really have a, you know, I think we need probably 1 or 2 years to really develop a clarified vision before we would, you know, try to ask for those sorts of resources.
Do you have a support group of people?
We don't. And even though, I mean, compared to some of the museums here, we're very young. We're only about 30 years old. But I would also say that with us, we're kind of new to the whole garnering support because we were, what I like to tell people is like we were a founders museum because it's the Rice Museum. Rice refers to a couple. That was their last name. And so for a very long period of time, their daughter, and she's actually still alive, she's wonderful, and she supports the museum, but she was like really supporting the museum, like financially, for a very long period of time. And now that's starting to change, and we're having to stand on our own 2 feet and support ourselves in terms of like doing everything financially. So we don't have a support group. I think that would be something that's down the line. I'm still trying to figure out certain things for our museum, and also it's just hard because it's like you look at it and go, okay, wait, support group to buy something, or do we try to fix the flooding in the basement, right? You know, and it becomes like it's important to add to your collection and have these important things on display, but then it's like, but if you don't have the space to display them because the basement is flooding, that doesn't work either. So, you know, it's kind of like, okay, what do we do here?
And I think each museum has a different mission, right? If your
Yeah.
museum is more targeted towards the public, the Smithsonian, we have a massive collection. We're America's attic, right? That's what they call us, because our job is to preserve things for the future. So we actually do not take loans from other people because we only want to show things that belong to the national collection. So a loan would be great for a museum like Arizona, where you have a smaller museum, you're able to change things out at a faster rate than we do. So it turns out that, and I didn't know this until I started working at the Smithsonian, every single specimen was a gift. Pretty amazing.
Wow.
Not a single penny of taxpayer money goes towards purchasing specimens at the Smithsonian. Every single specimen was given, whether it was a direct gift, so if you go downstairs, we have some new gifts that we got today, or whether it's an endowment. So we are very, very strong supporters of having endowments because it's essentially a long-term way to support the mission of the collection and of the museum. And so that's pretty much it, endowments or direct gifts. And so it is pretty remarkable what the Smithsonian has been able to do. Of course, we're a much larger institution, and so that is something that I think other museums are starting to consider as well.
Any other questions?
We good?
Last question. No, how much time do we have left?
None.
We're none.
Yeah,
Then we're
we're
done, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, in one word, what makes your museum special?
In one word.
Or one sentence?
You're going to stay here for a long time.
I think I would say the things that make us special are only possible because we're located in Tucson.
Tucson, I like it.
For us, it's going to be the relationship between the industry, well, in between the primary product, that is the mineral, and the industry, the final product. What you're going to be able to make out from your mineral. It can be a piece of jewel, of course.
For me, it has to be because we are related to we are hosted in one of the most academic institutions in the United States. So being at Harvard completely makes our collection special in that sense, academically.
For us, definitely, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I was going to just say, I hate using the word unique, but quirkiness of this rock and mineral collection that was started by this couple, and then in their home, and then on this acreage. It's just really fascinating.
And of course, the National Gem Collection.
Yeah.
So
Says it all.
wonderful. Thank you all so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us.
Thank you. That was fun. Thank you.